Good morning. Welcome to Dev by Design. As always, our mission is to talk about design fundamentals and break them down so that developers can use them when creating their own designs for all of their various things or when collaborating with designers. Basically, just like a little peek into the world of design for developers that are looking to build up that skill set. Today, we are going to be talking about balance, about visual balance, and about creating balance in your designs. Let me see if we've got any kind of housekeeping. Makes it sound very boring, but any announcements or things to chat about. I will be at Codestock on Thursday and Friday, giving a talk called Learn Enough Design to Be Dangerous on Thursday, and then one called Ditch the Media Queries on Friday. So if you will be in Knoxville or if you will be at Codestock, come say hey. Sam and Ed will be there too. So it's just it's a progress party. So come by, come hang out. It'll definitely be a good time. The other thing that's fun, I don't know if you guys happened to see the wonderful April Fool's thing that our Kindle React team put together. I'll share my screen. But it's a lot of fun. We have a new button on our Kindle React homepage. It says, "Don't you miss the 90s?" When you click it, it brings us to this incredible made with love 90s version of our website, which I found, I'm going to go ahead and say, charming. Like deeply nostalgic, the amount of care that was put into it. And it did crack me up. Our component preview is just like, the contrast is absolutely killing me. But it was such a cute little April Fool's Day project. They even found the old Progress logo and used it. So if you ever wanted to, quickly jump back and forth through time, the April Fool's Day joke is a good one. And I want to take a quick peek. I heard that they actually built it using classic. I was hoping it was going to be a table layout. Oh, yeah, it is. The whole thing's in a table. That's dedication. So a little peek behind the curtain shows that they were thoughtful. They really did this the way that it would have been. Oh man, that's great. I'm just peeking through now. It is funny, the mix of tables and divs trying to find a thing that works. Man, this is nostalgic. I can't even remember the last time I had to write a call span. Well, my dog got bored. He was under my desk for a little bit, just hanging out quietly. And of course, he wouldn't do that for the whole stream. So if you hear any noise behind me, that's the dog. But anyway, very cute little April Fool's Day gag. If you haven't checked it out, you can find it on KindleReact.com. KindleReact.com/KindleReactUI. Either one will work, I think. I think if you go to KindleReact.com. Yeah, okay. I said KindleReact.com, and then I actually looked at the URL, and it didn't say KindleReact.com, and I was like, did I forget my own website URL? No, I didn't. It's okay. KindleReact.com. So that being said, today we are going to talk a little bit about balance. And balance in design is one of those things that's really interesting because we all have this really innate sense of balance that is just part of being human, right? So we talked about this super briefly when we were talking about some other methods of putting stuff on the page and other things about layout. But balance, because we as humans have had to learn to walk upright and run and other things that require just moving our bodies requires balance. Staying safe in the world requires balance. Things that are unbalanced look structurally unstable. It would have been unsafe to hang out under things that were unbalanced, rocks or caves or things that looked unbalanced. And to this day, when you're just navigating the world, you have a sense of balance, and it's so intrinsically tied to the idea of safety, and of self-preservation and of comfort, that we as humans seek out things that are balanced. And if you look around, even on your desk or wherever you are, probably most of the things that you own, just objects on your desk, are balanced, because that is what is most practical, right? Your monitor is balanced around a single weight-bearing axis in the middle, because that's how physics works. That's how life works. Most things you could cut them in half, would be pretty much the same, right? I'm looking around to see if I can think of any big exceptions to this rule, and there's really only a couple. Just looking around my own desk, things are pretty darn symmetrical. And that makes the most sense, right? That is an easy way for things to physically balanced. In design, it's pretty much the same, right? Visual balance works almost exactly the same way that physical balance does, where if you were to draw a line down the center axis, both sides would be equally weighted enough that it wouldn't topple over, Hello, Kevin. Welcome back. Glad to have you. And hello to everyone else who might have joined and just be hanging out. You're welcome too. So, man, I am bad at jumping around. As soon as I have another thought, it's Con, what was I talking about? Balance, center axes. You can create balance really easily by kind of drawing that line down the center. Even here, let's pull up some examples. That is probably the easiest thing to do. But to tie it back, yesterday, Jesus, struggle bus today. Last week on Dev by Design, we talked a lot about visual weight, right? And on manipulating visual weight to create hierarchy in your designs. And that by pushing things up and giving them heavier visual weight, that is what attracts your viewer's eye. And you can guide them through the page by kind of controlling that visual weight in a way that guides them through from the most important to your least important. So giving your most prominent things the heaviest visual weight by using size, color, position, texture, things that grab the eye and look really interesting. We'll look at those things with heavier visual weight and then kind of work our way down. That's one half of things, right? You have to know how to manipulate that visual weight. But the other part of it is making sure that when we look at our designs, they feel good. They feel balanced. They feel grounded. They feel comforting, because harkening back to that way that balance is so intrinsic to all of us, that feeling of things being off balance is also very intrinsic. So if when we look at things that are balanced and when we are dealing with things that are balanced, do we feel safe, happy, comfortable, grounded? When we're looking at things that are unbalanced, we are more likely to feel kind of tense and on edge or just a little bit off. A lot of us have a very natural instinct to try and correct things that are off balance. If you've ever walked into a room and a photo is just hanging askew on the wall, you really want to go over there and fix it. That drives a lot of people really crazy. And that kind of stuff comes over into your design. And even if someone looks and isn't able to be that's off balance, this is visually askew, it's not always that obvious. But that feeling, that wrongness feeling, hangs around. And a lot of the time when people look at designs that are something's off, something doesn't feel right, so this just needs a little more work, or it's not finished, or it's not, it's not right in some way, a lot of times what they're responding to is that idea of balance. There's something on your page that is not balanced, and it's making your viewers feel something's wrong. So that being said, here is an example, right, of off balance. And you can kind of see here, actually, let me get this the same size as the illustration, right? So when we are looking at this, this feels off balance. There's this one larger square that is so much heavier, and because of that, it's taking up all this space. It's much closer to this other side than over here. What I want to do, at least when I look at this, I want to shift it over to the right. Like, I want to do this to make it feel right, to make it feel balanced. Because when we're doing that, we're shifting where the center vertical axis is. I wish I could just like draw on like my web browser. I'm sure there's like a Chrome extension that would let me do that, that would let me just like write notes all over my screen. But I'm not going to try and seek it out right now. But anyway, because this looks like this, it feels off balance because our vertical axis is in fact here, making this side much heavier than this side. And it makes it feel literally askew. Makes it feel literally so much heavier on one side. If you were to imagine these as like a set of scales, like the old school like astrology Libra scales, you know? Like if you put one side on one side of the scale and the other side of this drawing on the other side of the scale, it would be off. It's hard to describe balance because it is in fact like scientific, right? Like you could draw the line and you could look and you can visually assess and talk about like how much of this page is, you know, taken up by content and how much of it is not, and how big is it and how does it draw the eye. But a lot of it is really kind of gut feeling. Like it's faster. Once you get a feel for it, it's faster. It's almost kind of like when you were learning how to drive, right? Like when you were 16 and you were learning how to drive, you had to be so conscious of everything. You were thinking constantly about like, all right, speed up, slow down, wait, turn signal, where's my turn signal? Wait, I need to use my windshield wipers. Where was that? Wait, I need to slow down. Wait, how fast am I going? You know, and it's just like constantly in your brain. Once you learn how to drive, that's all kind of background noise, right? You're just driving. And at the same time, you're like thinking about like, oh, what's for lunch? Or like, what do I need to do at work today? Or like, I want to listen to a song on the radio. Like, you know, you're not thinking about the driving part anymore. Design is very much the same way. And a lot of times when people are thinking about having like the eye or some kind of like natural aptitude for design, they're just looking at people that have already learned to drive, you know, like they just missed the time when those people were still consciously thinking about every single thing going into their design. I think balance is one of the places where we see that the most, right? Where once you kind of learn it, it's one of the things you can kind of skip forward on most because balance is so intrinsic. So a lot of times you can just look and feel. And if that's not working for you, like you totally can draw lines, parse things out, make lists, what's big here, what's not big here, what's drawing my attention on this side, what's drawing my attention on that side. Do those elements visually balance each other out? Do they not? You can take a very methodical approach, but more often you'll be able to just look and feel whether something is off balance. You know, spam in the comments. Ignore it. I will get them banned later. Yeesh. Anyway, when we are looking at things that are off balance, right, we have that feeling we want to correct it. That's not something that we want in our UI designs. We want things to feel balanced. We want them to feel correct. You know, we want them to feel like this. We want them to feel right. So all of that kind of comes back to this idea of visual weight, right? So here's a couple more examples of things with different visual weight. And this kind of ties back to that hierarchy thing that we were talking about before. Things with heavier visual weight is where our eyes go first. So obviously in this example, we are drawn to that giant black circle. It is bigger. It is darker in value. It is just heavier in volume. And so our eyes will go there first before we go to the smaller, lighter, more like delicate snowflake illustration. And again, that creates a feeling of being off balance when you try to place those two on equal sides of a center line. On the other hand, we can control that. And again, this harkens back when we were talking about like creating visual hierarchy with color. We've got a good example of that here, where this red square is attracting our attention much, much more than the yellow square. And that has to do with the contrast in value between the squares in the background. So red has a darker value than yellow. And so against that white background, which has like, you know, no real value to speak of, the heavier one is going to be the one that comes forward to our eyes. And that will be the one that we focus on first. All of this kind of has to be taken into account when we are talking about balancing items on the page. And there are, in fact, several ways to do that, right? So like the most obvious of those ways, well, where's my illustration? Here we go. The most obvious way to balance something is for it to be completely symmetrical, right? So like this one, mirror image. You draw a line down the center here. This thing is identical on either side. These squares, exactly the same size, exactly the same color, exactly the same placement. This is nice. Like it's certainly the easiest way, but it's not always the most practical way, especially when we are talking about UI design specifically, because we don't always get things in matched sets, right? Like your UI elements aren't always going to be able to completely mirror each other. It's not practical, you know? There are lots of ways that this can be used. Most often we see this more in like web design, especially like kind of commerce-y web design. So like I did put some examples. Here's some screenshots that I took, right? So like here's one from Balance. Haha, right? Like, of course, the Balance website is perfectly balanced. But like, again, if you drew a line right down the center of this, identical, completely mirror image identical. When we use this, we can create, we kind of like tap into that sensitivity that we have to the feeling of balance and the way that it makes us feel good, right? And that perfectly symmetrical balance cranks that all the way up to 11. It feels very, very comfortable. It feels grounded. It feels stable. Sometimes it can even cross that line into feeling a little bit boring. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's not, right? So like it works really well here because this is a meditation app and you really want that feeling of like centeredness, groundedness. It's nothing that's going to like feel new or off kilter or interesting. It's like it really wants to feel traditional, centered, grounded, you know, clear. Right, here's another page. This one was from like a clothing rented, I think it was from Rent the Runway. And again, they're kind of tapping into that feeling of like classic, tradition, grounded, right? Rent the Runway primarily sells like, not sells, I guess they are renting formal clothes. It allows you to like rent a dress for a nice occasion and then return it. So here we've got the same thing. Line down the middle. This is identical on both sides. We'll see it a lot with brands that are more expensive, kind of trying to present themselves as luxury. So here's an Apple one. Oh, there's the image I was looking for earlier. Apple is probably the like number one. I bet if we even go to the website, like let's check out what's live on apple.com. Yep, absolutely perfect symmetrical balance all the way down. I mean, this is truly like exact balance. They get a little bit funkier on the product pages, but not a lot. In this, I mean, this is super clear, right? This is a literal line down the center, exact symmetrical balance. It's very interesting. So they've leaned into this extra hard. Here we're starting to get a little bit asymmetrical balance. We'll talk about this a little bit more, but it's still pretty sharp. Yeah. So we see that a lot. Here's another with Dior, again, really leaning into that literal line down the middle, a division of the screen, like that is very much in play. So if you are looking to place yourself, your product, whatever you are creating as something that is timeless, classic, traditional, rounded, sometimes by extension, like expensive, right? This idea of like permanence, stability, last you a lifetime, right? Like all of that you can kind of tap into and communicate through that use of perfectly symmetrical balance. On the other hand, again, not super practical, right? Won't always work for everything. And especially if you're thinking about things that are a little more complex, like a full-on application design, very rarely are you going to be able to make use of that like perfect mirror image balance. And in that case, we are talking about asymmetrical design, asymmetrical balance, rather, in your design. So this is kind of our basic example here. We've got our square from before on one side, and on the other, we've got these 4 circles. And they're not exactly the same, right? Like, so again, draw our line down the center. These feel balanced, even though they are not the exact same on both sides. And that's how asymmetrical balance works. You're just matching the visual weight on either side of that center axis. And it doesn't have to be exactly the same. It just has to command roughly the same amount of your user's attention. We see this like way more. Let me grab some of my examples for these, and then we'll just go to the web and like see what we can find. So like here's a screenshot I took from the Progress website that is using this asymmetrical balance approach, right? So we've got this image on one side, and then it's balanced on the other hand by this text. And this is like probably one of the most common like website layouts, right? And yeah, here's another one that's doing pretty much exactly the same thing, right? Big text with the header, a little bit of informational text underneath, button or link under that, balanced by a large image. Exactly the same as what's happening over here. Big text, supporting text, button, balanced by a large image. These are not obviously exactly the same, but if you draw your line here, down the middle, then it feels the same because our eyes are being drawn kind of equally to the things that are happening on either side. And we've created balance by creating visual weights that feel correct. So the text is pretty heavy. That red button is drawing our attention big time. But on the other hand, we have this illustration, right? And the illustration has a fair bit of visual weight because it's using some really bright colors. And it's also got people, right? So our eyes as humans naturally very drawn to other people. This is cranked up even more when we're using like real photography, like pictures of actual other humans. Our eyes will be drawn there kind of disproportionately because we are looking for that kind of like connection. You can turn that up even another notch by using pictures where the person in the photo is making eye contact. So just a little fun fact. We will always be drawn to other people, and again, even more to people that look like they are looking at us because it's such a natural human urge for connection. So you can up your balance in ways like that by changing how much we're going to pay attention, I guess is maybe the right word, to what's on the page, right? And again, over here, we've got the image. This one is kind of visually intricate with the spokes. It's lighter, so it doesn't draw our eye immediately, but once we're there, it kind of holds us for a minute. So we've got some visual weight there. And then, yeah, the pretty standard, like 3-prong, big text, little text, link. Let's see what we can find just out on the World Wide Web. If anyone has website suggestions, or just in general, if anyone's like, I want to go look at this website, let's see what the balance looks like, drop them in the comments. We'll check them out. Let's think about web applications. Let's go to Twitter. This feels like a gamble. I was gonna say, like, let's see what weird thing is being posted on Twitter right now as I pull it up on live stream. Dangerous, very dangerous. So this one actually has a pretty symmetrical layout, right? So like as we're looking here down the middle, the feed is placed center. And then we've got these sidebars, one on each side, that kind of mirror each other and feel visually weighted evenly. Yeah, I'm trying to see what else we got. And all of their pages look roughly the same, right? They follow this all the way through with communities, notifications, etc. Center column, left column, right column. Let's see. Go target. Lots of perfect symmetry happening on the web today. Right down the middle, you can see, right, again, perfect split. Other web applications. And Notion. So this one, here you get like a little peek at what I'm working on, which is a lot of conference talks right now. Spoiler alert. Here we've got some asymmetrical balance, right? Because we've got the sidebar off on the side. And it's smaller. It's visually weighted by the larger section in the middle. I do have an example of this somewhere. Let me pull that open. So that works when we're talking about asymmetrical balance with like that feels very off. We're looking at something more like this, right? Where something smaller on the far side can balance something larger closer to the middle. Sidebars are probably like the primary way that we do this in UI design. Here's a screenshot I took in like Jira, right? So again, we've got the sidebar over here. It's smaller. It is the darker color is helping it kind of recede visually, so it's not taking up as much visual weight as the big white box, right? And because this is more towards the center and that is offset, we're still ending up creating a kind of visual balance, so it doesn't feel super awkward. There's a little bit of off balanceness that's happening because the text is entirely shifted to the left side of this box. So not ideal, but you know, it's doing all right. There's one other kind of primary kind of balance, and that is radial balance. It is not used very often at all. But what radial balance is that normally we're really focused on that like left-right balance, right? So you can create something that is balanced entirely by focusing on either side of that center axis. But there is also, right, like horizontal top-bottom balance. And so when you're creating something that is perfectly balanced all the way around, you've often created something that is circular, right? Something that is radial. Things like watch faces or timers, right? So here's an example of a timer that's using radial balance, right? You've got this here up and down, but then of course also left to right. Or one of my favorites, the classic Space Jam website from the 90s, which amazing that like this existed when this was all table-based, right? So like that's something that I've always found kind of cool, is the way in which web designers and designers in general have kind of fought with the technology and the material that's available to them. So like when this was created, this was all like table-based layouts, right? Like this would be so much easier to do now, but then it would be kind of a fight. So it's interesting to see the ways in which designers have traditionally like taken what's available to them and just kind of done whatever the heck they want, used it in ways that could not have possibly been imagined, you know? Like I've always found that to be kind of cool. The other place that we see a lot of radial design is in video games, right? So this has become a really common approach in video game menus and controls, this kind of like radial quick menu. Yeah, Space Jam was the pinnacle of design. There is, I think, a lot to be said for that like era of Wild West web design in the 90s when we were just like, yeah, we can do it. Why not? It's very much the like the Jurassic Park line when it's like you were too busy, worrying about whether or not you could to think about whether or not you should. And I feel like that sums up most of like the 90s era design. Oh, good morning. Thanks for joining us in good old days of GeoCities. Oh yeah, for those of you that missed it, actually, I'm gonna pull this back up. I think I've been thinking about like the 90s and GeoCities design because our April Fool's Day gag this year was to turn the Can Do React site into like a 90s era GeoCities layout. And I thought it was the funniest thing. And I like when you peek behind the curtain and like inspect the code, it is actually like tables all the way down, right? And like a little bit of marquee, a little bit of like some of these GIFs. It's only really missing like an under construction GIF. That would have really sealed the deal for me. Is one of those like there's a website that has a bunch of them. I'm trying to remember what it was. The like I'm gonna see if I can find it by just searching under construction GIF. There we go. There was some guy that like compiled all of the GIFs. Where is it? Is it this? No. We're just gonna click like random links on the internet until we find on live stream. That's gonna be fun. There was a great website that had all of those like 90s era. There it is. I found it. I got it. It's this beauty. And it's just incredible. Truly a gift. This was what but like yeah, this era of web design, what a gift. Truly what a gift. How insane that we just used to put this stuff all over. Yeah. Gorgeous. Chaos. Oh, app page to get early 2K feeling. There's an I'm sure that I'm familiar with this acronym when you explain it to me, but all I can think of is the song right now. So I need you to tell me what WAP stands for in this context. Oh, again, very vaguely related. Did you see that the Home Stronger guys put out a new Strong Bad email in April? I love that they're still doing those and they just drop them on us once in a blue moon and all of us are like, whoa, oh yeah, that was awesome. Yeah. We're missing this rawness in modern design. And this is something that's like, this is so interesting to me because I saw a tweet that was like of this nature the other day and they were talking about the Winamp skins, right? Which for those of you unfamiliar, Winamp was a media player in the early 2000s and you could skin it however you wanted. And it was absolute chaos. They were talking specifically in the tweet about this one with this guy where the forehead was the actual like media content. But like I very much remember being obsessed with choosing a Winamp skin. Mine were mostly embarrassingly anime related because I was a big ol' nerd. Yeah. It is impossible to think about Winamp without thinking about that weird introduction. I don't think I can say no. I think work would probably prefer if I don't curse on stream. So will this let me look things up? Oh yeah. This rules. This is absolutely. I am pretty sure that I had this one at one point. That Sailor Moon one. These are incredible. This is exactly the kind of crap that I had on mine when I was a young girl. These fantastic. Yeah. there's a lot that I like that I miss about Winamp. It was pleasant. It was fun. But they were talking about how like customizable these were and what an era of design this was when we kind of had this like total free form you do whatever you want kind of approach to design. And there's some trade-offs that have come with that, right? Like on one hand, we're missing some of the like weirdness and uniqueness that came with absolute open. On the other hand, we lost a lot of accessibility, right? Like in this era, we were not particularly worried about who was able to use what we created. We were just creating. And so you kind of win some, lose some. And objectively, like looking at these, while they are fun and they are nostalgic, most of these are objectively not very good design, right? So like this guy, the contrast is super, super low. Some of these are so busy, you can't really tell what's up. This one, you can't even really see the buttons, right? Like, I'm just picking and choosing. I know these were not designed by actual designers, you know. But when you, there's a little bit of like win some, lose some that you get here, right? Yeah. Why not both? Have accessible skins, allow anyone to make their own. I think that would be pretty ideal, right? The difference is, I guess, whether we're talking about things that are on the desktop or things that are on the web, right? So like, I think a lot of the shift that we also saw was that Winamp was a program that you downloaded to your personal computer and you were the only one using it, skinned the way that you did, right? You went out, you found skins, you downloaded them, you installed them, etc., etc., etc. It was totally based on your personal computer. Whereas like on the flip side now, so much lives on the web and so much of what we're using is just web applications, right? And some people are doing this. I think Slack actually is a really good example of an application that has created some really good skins. They have lots of options. Let's pull them up. Let's see which. Yeah, so like here's a Slack in my browser. So I can go here to preferences, right, and themes, and they've got several themes that I can choose from, and they've done a really good job, I think, of creating things that are like really fun, like the terminal theme, and then things that are more focused on accessibility, right? They've got this section, accessible and clear, where they're really focused on that. And then just some more fun ones, right? Like all their classic themes. But you can also create a custom theme by going in and adjusting each one of these values. I've done that before a couple times, and there are certainly people out there that do that. I think like code editors are another place, terminals are another place where we are still seeing people create their own themes quite a bit. So, for example, right, like I've customized the colors that I use in my code editor, and my terminal is pink because that makes me truly happy. But on the flip side, like when you're dealing with something where you are providing exclusively just a handful of themes on a web application that doesn't live on someone's computer, you kind of have to choose your battles, right, on like what you're going to offer. I do love this, and I wish more places did this. I love this idea of like publishing an accessibility guide to be like, hey, here's what we've created. Here's what we intended. We gave you the power to customize, but here's what we would suggest. Because I think it's especially important. And yes, y'all know me too well, throwing Star Trek jokes in my in my feed. We've become the Borg. Resistance is futile. I like to think, honestly, like, A, good oak, love it, A+. But in a more serious way, I like to think we've kind of come out of that a little bit. I think we were in the worst of that when we were in the like kind of bootstrappy era. And it's just kind of part of the trade-off, right? Of like how accessible isn't the right word because I don't mean it in a like ally accessibility like kind of way, but like how accessible are we making web creation, right? Like how much code do you need to know to put something on the internet? And if we are going to offer these kind of like drag and drop, WYSIWYG kind of create your own tools, then yeah, a lot of things end up looking kind of the same on the internet because people are using the same things to create them without really having the knowledge of like what's happening behind the scenes, right? A lot of that, like every website looks the same kind of thing that was happening for a long time where you had the like big header image and like 3 little things. There was a website for a while that was doing that. Like, let me see if I can find it. There was like a fake website that was like, every website looks like this. But yeah, I can't find it. If anyone else can find it, go for it. But anyway, the fact that I Googled this and there's this many hits is probably proof enough. But yeah, it's this general kind of layout, right? The like big thing, header and the button over the major image, and then like usually broken down. A lot of that came from of web design, where we were letting people have access to content management systems for the first time. They were able to choose from a limited number of themes, but they were able to put their own content out on the web without having to know how to code, which is cool, right? Like that is a cool thing. So we kind of see this swing from the 90s where you had to be, you know, a quote unquote webmaster to put your stuff out there. And we had GeoCities and we had some stuff that maybe like made it a little bit easier, but you still had to know a heck of a lot about web development, how the web worked and how like website files needed to be structured and optimized and like whatever, just to get your stuff onto the web. And then we kind of broke that barrier and we saw that early 2000s run of stuff that very visually looked the same because it mostly was the same, right? It was people using similar default themes on content management systems to create their own web page. And while that improved the accessibility of who could put things on the internet, it did have that flip side of not being great and interesting from a design standpoint. Now I think we're kind of rebalancing, right? So like there's still a lot of that like kind of CMSE stuff out there where people will so with less of this, right? And more of kind of an in-between where, but like the idea of getting a custom theme is a lot more common now, and the idea of like wanting your stuff to look different and feel different is a lot more common. Oh man, these tabs are a mess. I forgot that this branched off from us talking about radial balance. But yeah, I think it's going to continue in that direction. And I think we'll start to see some of that kind of creativity of the like late 90s web design stuff come back now that we have the tools to offer people the ability to put their stuff on the internet and not always have it look the same. Right. And I think we'll continue to see that kind of ebb and flow as like new tools come and new advancements come. And, you know, people that want to take advantage of that new stuff right away will probably, you know, people who want to take advantage of that new stuff right away, who are not developers, will go through where it'll all kind of start to look the same. And then as more and more tools will be developed to let other people take advantage of that kind of stuff, we'll see things spread out. Then something new will happen. It'll condense more tools to work to that feature will spread out. You know, like if there's really anything to take away about like art history or design history, even, it's that it's very cyclical, right? We will go through phases. We will go through loops where we are confronting a problem, solving a problem, being bored with that problem, being faced with a new problem. And we'll go through that just over and over and over again. And we see it through art history as well, where we like kind of swing back and forth between different movements and different problems that artists are trying to solve. We're actually going to talk about this in a few weeks. I've got a really interesting thing lined up for y'all on grids and kind of the history of the grid, especially in web design and development. So I don't want to eat into that topic too much. But yes, the wheel of time turns. The wheel weaves what it wills. And we see these kinds of phases in design. And we have seen them forever. We will continue to see them forever. And you've probably even noticed some of them, right? Like when touchscreens were new, when we first got the iPhone in like 06, right? The idea of interacting entirely through touch with no physical buttons was so new that the design skewed very much back in that way in order to give them something like normal, something that they could like latch onto, right? So we had this era of Skew Market design where things looked on the screen very much like they looked in real life. So Group's comments have been popping off and I've been ranting. So what do we have? Yeah, now it is hard to figure out the SEO stuff to get the algorithms to pick up your websites. Yeah, I agree. But this is a good to be, right? Where those are the problems that we're dealing with. Those are still annoying problems. But anyone who wants to put something on the internet right now can, and that's been kind of a mixed blessing, but overall I think it's a good thing, right? Like it does mean that we've got some weird stuff out there that people now we're confronting kind of the flip side of that, right? Which is misinformation and disinformation. But in general, I think that's better than a future of tech where not everyone has access. I would rather it be open season and us kind of narrow down from there than it only be accessible or available to people that have huge amounts of time to dedicate to mastering the technology. Yeah, we've gone from switches, buttons, and knobs on Kirk's Enterprise to the touchscreen tech of the next generation era. Yeah, I think we're very much there. This I find so interesting because so much of the tech that we have now, like just all over, is super based on sci-fi tech, right? So like, I'm going to say this without any source, so feel free to correct me, but I read somewhere once that automatic doors, like when you walk up to like a grocery store and the door is like, zoop, that happened on Star Trek first, right? And on Star Trek, it was just people standing behind doors, physically moving them when the actors came up to it. But because we saw that presented in sci-fi, it became something that we wanted to make real, right? And even down to like the idea of like replicators, we're getting awfully close with things like 3D printing to the idea of being able to like go in and tell a replicator what you want and have it like dispense that thing to you. And so I think, yes, like, and the idea of touchscreens as well, right? Like when TNG was on the air and they were tapping on completely flat screens, there was nothing like that. Everything was very tactile. Did we create tablets because a generation of people grew up watching TNG? I can't tell you that scientifically, but I think probably. I think the ideas that we have right now around like AR and VR are highly influenced by the sci-fi that we've been watching for the last generation, where people see things, up in front of them and we see them like move things around in midair like this. I think all of that is quite possible. That if I were to make large, sweeping, pointless predictions about what's next, that kind of thing is probably next, right? Like when we think about it, I think things like Google Glass or whatever, that kind of AR that's very integrated into our everyday lives, there's a good chance, I think, that kind of stuff eventually will get to a point where it's not so, like, the hardware is not so physically frustrating, that it becomes something that we start to use in that way. And we'll see people, and it'll kind of be like that era when like Bluetooth was new and we joked about like people talking to themselves all the time. People used to have those like big Bluetooth headsets that wrapped around their neck and we would be like, look at that person, they look crazy talking to themselves. Now I do that all the time with my AirPods, right? I'm constantly talking to myself on my AirPods and nobody gives me a second glance, right? So like, I bet we'll go through a similar era where we see a lot of this, where people are doing interfaces in front of them. And then it will become so normal that we won't even think about it. Yeah. The grid is in Tron. Yeah, right. That would be fun. Pleasing the algorithms is our job. Depends on your job. But yeah, I do think that's probably something that's also, again, if I'm talking about trends, that one with the moving things in front of you, I think is probably further out. But I think sooner rather than later, we'll start to see a reckoning. I think we're starting to see some of that. I've got some thoughts and feelings on, but ultimately, I think that a lot of where they're coming from is a response to this kind of thing, where there's this idea that like there's only a few major sites that run and control what we see via their algorithms, and I think we're starting to see people chafe against that in a way that they didn't used to. So it'll be interesting to see over the next, like, I would say like 5 or so years, how that kind of starts to shift. Because I think we're maybe not starting to enjoy the algorithm and the level of catered content that we are getting. We just need warp drive. We do need warp drive. We are based on the Star Trek timeline. We are very close to, again, within the Trek timeline, we're very close to when the Bell riots happen in San Francisco, which is the like catalyst point for the major like overhaul in society in Trek. So if we can make it through, I believe the Bell riots happen in 2024 in Trek. Yeah, September 2024. And that kind of kicked off the societal revolution that led to like United Earth. And then first contact in Trek was like 21 something. Ooh, sooner than I thought. First contact in Trek is April 2063. We're tomorrow's first contact day, y'all. So yeah, we're only, another 40-ish years away from the Vulcans making first contact with us. So really, we just need to get our stuff together. Yeah. The latest Picard is very much getting up into the Bell riots. They found, just in the last episode, they went to a sanctuary district, right? Like an actual, they had been kind of alluding to it because they were like geographic. They're in California somewhere. I don't think they're in San Fran. I don't remember, honestly. I think they're in like LA. But anyway, they went to a sanctuary district. It seems very much like they're interested in calling back to a lot of that DS9 stuff. Yeah. I am loving this season of Picard. It's so good. It is so good, which has been a relief because, frankly, Discovery is fine, but nothing special. And so to jump back into Picard and have it be special has been like, yes. It makes me very optimistic for Strange New Worlds. So we shall see. Yeah. I remember the hit 1995 movie Hackers when he puts on a headset for his monitor. I thought we'd have more eyeglass AR style gear. This was actually, my husband and I were talking about this literally just the other day. My husband and I were talking about this like eye gear style stuff because he's rereading Ready Player One, which is very much like they've got the like VR headsets and they're in the like, they call it the Oasis. It's effectively like the metaverse, right? And we're big Shadowrun fans. I love Shadowrun. And there's, the idea of like the Deckers, right? Who can like jump into cyberspace and do hacking like in a physical kind of sense. So we've always had that like sci-fi idea. I think right now we are stopped primarily by like hardware limitations. I think here's my theory with no basis, is that right now, because like sci-fi has set such a high bar, we have this idea that you would put on a headset and you would feel totally immersed. And headsets don't do that for us right now. You still feel them. They feel clunky for a lot of people. They make you kind of motion sick. You don't, when you pick something up in VR, you don't feel the weight of it in the same way. You can't move, you can't walk the way you would if you were walking, you've run into walls and stuff. So we still have this kind of glitch where it's pretty darn good, but I think the bar for our expectation of what VR should feel like has been set almost hilariously high by things like Ready Player One and things like Hackers and things like Shadowrun and even things like the holodeck, right? In Star Trek, we have this idea of like full immersion, and it's not there yet. And so I think we're kind of chafing against that right now, and I think we'll come through it. But yeah. In fact, I am into TTRPGs so much. Love tabletop. I have not heard about Tokyo Otherscape, but I'm curious. In fact, by the way, for people that have joined in, and I'm just like talking about nothing that's design related anymore. We actually do it was called Fantasy Fridays, or sometimes we call it Sci-Fi Fridays. But basically the Code It Live team hangs out on Fridays at like 10:30 a.m. Eastern time to talk exclusively about this stuff, geekery of all forms. And they did it mostly so that I would stop doing this on my actual shows, and I will not. You cannot stop me, as it turns out. I am interested in this. I will have to check this out later. Thank you for sharing it with me. But yeah, I do agree that we have to imagine it first. And we have to, no, I derailed. It's okay. And I'm gonna loop it back in. We'll get back there. I'll bring it back around. But yeah, I agree. We have to imagine it first. We have to write about it. We have to visualize it. We have to play with it in things like video games and tabletop RPGs and books and TV. And then we'll make it real and we'll get there. But that's someone had asked about why don't we have that kind of stuff yet? And that's my theory. Trek Adventures is another good role link. Ooh, interesting. I haven't played any of the Trek tabletop stuff, mostly because my group, not everyone is a Trek fan in the actual I have an actual D&D group, and we mostly play D&D. We occasionally play Shadowrun, and we've dabbled with some other stuff. We played Starfinder recently, which was good. We played Pendragon for a hot minute. We've played it's not called Call of Cthulhu. I'm trying to remember what the Cthulhu tabletop game is actually called. But yeah, we've dabbled, but we have tended to stay away from some of the major titles because not everyone has read it or is into it. We tried that once. We played the Dresden Files tabletop game for a minute, but not everyone had really read enough Dresden to know what was up. So we've kind of decided to stay away from that, which is a shame. Especially because I've heard that they're releasing some Doctor Who content for 5e, and I desperately want to play it. So who knows? Maybe I'll make some of y'all play it with me because I really want to try it. Yeah. Oh, I've been hoping we'd have an AI with Alexa, Cortana, or Siri to play as the Dungeon Masters. Paizo had one on Amazon with Starfinder. Interesting. I didn't know they made one for Starfinder. Yeah, I feel like we've seen some of that. There was, it was actually just a joke, but it was actually really funny. They released that Skyrim voice thing for the Echo, for the Dot. I'm trying not to say her name because I have one within spitting distance of me. So, but yeah, it was pretty good. You could tell it to open doors and explore dungeons and swing at Draugr and stuff. It would be interesting, but I think a lot of people like the human aspect of tabletop gaming. So we'll see. It would be cool. I do agree there. So, but I was talking a little bit about, I'm going to jump back in. Feel free to keep distracting me, but I'm going to jump back into skeuomorphism for just a hot minute. Because it started, we were talking about touchscreens, right? And when touchscreens were new, there was this fear that like people wouldn't get it, that like we needed the tactile feedback of like typing, of like pressing buttons, right? And while they couldn't offer that, what they could do was make buttons look like buttons, right? And try to like close that gap for users as much as humanly possible. So when the iPhone first came out, we saw icons and buttons that looked like this. Let's see if I can find some like iPhone specific examples, right? So like stuff like this that really looked like literally what it was trying to be, right? So things like the leather stitching, right? Like the raised buttons, icons that looked very much like they had depth and, rounded corners, and like things would happen when you clicked them, and that was right. The books that looked like they were literally on a shelf, because the tech was so new, and there was this feeling that like maybe people won't really know what to do with this. And we saw this kind of thing as well when like graphical user interfaces were new on the computer, right? So like, oh god, what was it called? There was like a really early Microsoft thing. Let's see if I can just Google random things until I find it. There was a really early like Microsoft Windows thing where it looked like you were in a room, and it had literal like shelves and Windows early UI. Can I find it? I don't know the right things to search to find this. I'll never be able to find it. Oh well. If someone else knows what I'm talking about, throw it in the chat. Ah, here. No, there it is. I got it. Microsoft Bob, right? Had this idea of the family room. And it was the layout, right? That was like meant to look like being in a room, right? And it gave you things to latch onto that felt right for where you were, right? The like calendars were literal calendars, and like, money management software was in a wallet, and like it just made it make sense to people who would not have been familiar. Let me try another search now that I actually know what to call it. It connected things for people that would have otherwise not been able to make that kind of connection. Right. So here's what I was thinking about. That's why I was trying to think of like shelves, like, but right, like clocks that look like clocks and email that look like mail. And some of that is hung around. As you mentioned, like floppy disks as save icons. And like there's a lot of other examples too. I'm trying to think of some other ones. But yeah, this idea of creating UIs that look like the things that we're used to seeing, especially when technology is new, to bridge the gap for people that have not engaged with this kind of tech and but aren't used to working with those kind of abstractions yet, right? So starting with something that feels really concrete and visual and like one-to-one, very like, yeah, very obvious. And then eventually, right, we get to like, what's the current Microsoft? I can't think of what the current thing is, right? But like now our UIs look like this, this like super flat design, because we've been able to abstract that concept so much that we don't need those kinds of literal visual hearkenings anymore to understand. I think we'll go through that kind of pattern over and over and over again every time we do something new, And we saw it with Microsoft Bob, we saw it with phones. We'll see it a little bit with VR stuff, right? Like right now when you're in a VR, you usually see your literal hands kind of in front of you. I wonder how long it'll take for us to dispense with that notion, right? That we don't really need to be able to see our literal hands to be able to move things around. How long before that becomes a cursor or a dot or nothing at all, like Just spitballing. Yeah, I've heard that the hand gesture of holding thumb and pinky to one side of the head to mean call me is no longer recognizable. They use a flat hand to symbolize a mobile phone. It makes sense, but it does look silly. Like, I like ridiculous doing this. But yeah, I mean, this doesn't make sense either. So I get where they're coming from. But yeah, it's always going to continue. Visual language will always continue to evolve in this way. And it's always going to really depend on what we're using physically to interact with it, right? So like we're starting to see that now, especially that like the interfaces that we create for touchscreens are starting to feel very different from the interfaces that we create for like things you need a mouse for, right? And we're seeing that again, like with gaming, right? I was talking a little bit, this is where I diverged, like way off to the side. But with gaming, we're starting to see these like radial quick menus become like super, super common. This would never work, right, on almost anything else. We tried this for like a hot second with phones because we were thinking like, oh, like if you're pressing down with your thumb and then you can arc thing, didn't work. People hated it. But it works really well with video game interfaces when you have those two, I don't know, knobs. What do you call that? Levers? Control sticks? This feels embarrassing. I've never had to like give those little knobby things a name before. What the heck are they called? But anyway, radial menus make a ton of sense for things like that when you're working with something that's already working in a circular, like sticks. Yeah, sure. When you're working with those sticks that already work in a very circular fashion. The only way to make sense of reality is to accept that nothing makes sense. Also very true. But yeah, we're really starting to see, I think, layouts and designs and interfaces in general start to diverge because we're handling them in very different ways. And I think a lot of what is making interesting design is kind of being able to lean into what is intuitive for your users while also not making things that look exactly the same, right? You have to be able to not just create good design, but to create great design or interesting design. You have to ride that line between being familiar enough that your users can open it and know what to do with it, but also being innovative enough in specific areas for it to feel different or unique or do something new. And we touched ever so briefly on that a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about the idea of taking risk in design and where you can take risk in design and where that feels frustrating to users and where it feels rewarding, and kind of identifying places in your interfaces that are low risk, high reward, where you can be innovative and try new things and try, to capture a little bit of that like surprise and delight type thing. A lot of what I try to do on here is kind of talk about fundamentals that will get you to the good design level. Because I think that's mostly when we're talking about like developers who want to break into design or learn just enough about design, they're not really looking to like disrupt and create something incredible and like push the edge. They're just trying to create things that look good and are easy for their users to use. So we really focused a lot on kind of getting here to like good design level. But a lot of really cool shit. I said it. Like, oops, I cursed on stream. I'm not supposed to do that. Whatever. Cool shit happens here between the good and the like great design. It's also where you can make the most mistakes. So, again, trade-off, right? Like a lot of times people will try new stuff and it will flop hugely. I'm trying to think of like examples of like UI experiments that were a total no-go. Like some of the Facebook redesigns, we'll see them like try new stuff and everyone hates it and they'll revert back, right? You see it a lot with logo design. The Gap changed their logo ages ago and everyone super hated it. Google Glass, I think, is a good example. Yeah, of like they were stretching, they were trying something new. It didn't quite work out, but they tried, So yeah, I think when you're here, you're in the safe zone. When you push past that, that's where the cool stuff happens, but sort of take on a little bit more risk too. And that's okay. Either place I think is fine. Either now or before end of stream, do you have any recommended websites that break the common mold of the generic header, banner, content, footer, website design? Referenced it earlier, the site that points out all websites look the same. Ooh, let's see. Some good examples of sites that mix it up. I'm trying to remember like websites. I do like some of Apple's product pages. I think they do a good job of stepping away. So not like your main stuff, but like these guys, right? I think especially they've done a good job of tapping in. This is moving as I scroll, which is hard to capture, but they've done a good job of creating kind of interesting and immersive experiences where you're really getting something different as you're moving. So I find their stuff very, very interesting. I think I'm trying to find, there's some news sites that are doing cool stuff that are kind of like this, where things are kind of moving as you're, I'm trying to think of what the, like interactive immersive news stories. Let's see if I can find a good example. Interactive storytelling. There we go. Yeah. The New Yorker has done some cool stuff, right? Where they've kind of pushed the edge on what this looks like, right? And how you can tell a story and how you can and how you can kind of present things on the web, and using the web as a medium for a storytelling is a really good word, and not just kind of hitting the base. So when I'm looking at kind of people that are doing interesting things with design, this is the kind of stuff that intrigues me, is this kind of mixture of like medium and media with like short and punchy text, and using images and video to tell a story in a way that I think is pleasantly different. I don't know if that's exactly what you were looking for, because it's not quite like salesy, but I find them very interesting. Oop, I run out. I've used all my complimentary articles in the New Yorker on you guys, so you're welcome. But if anyone else has examples of websites that are doing interesting stuff in the mold, drop them in the chat. Like, let's look at them. I agree. Yeah. Microsoft Bug. Yeah. Thank you for your sacrifice. Only for y'all. Only for you. would I throw away all my free New Yorker articles? But yeah, I'm especially interested in this kind of thing that interacts with the user. There was a really cool one on Twitter. Here, I'm going to expose myself because I'm going to have to go through my likes to try and find it, and it was a while ago. But this guy had made something that was shifting the color on the screen on a phone as he was moving it. How far ago was it? Maybe it was too far back and I'll never find it. I like too many things on Twitter. That's what I'm learning. But anyway, if I can find it, I'll share it with you. But it was he was using the like gyroscope stuff on the iPhone to adjust the UI, like the colors of the UI, depending on the way that the phone was tilted. And it was really, really cool. So long ago that it's lost forever. Did I retweet it? Who knows? I'm on Twitter too much. Here, there it is. I found it. That was horrifyingly embarrassing. But yeah, I found this to be just incredibly cool. Like, right, this idea of, I guess that's it to me. Things that kind of bridge the gap where we forget for a minute that we're looking at a screen. Because I think we've become really, really used to the way that the kind of barrier that screens create, right? And the way things are supposed to be formatted on a screen. And so when things kind of reach past the screen and seem to interact with how we are as people existing in 3D space, you know, like when things move with us or when they respond to what we're doing, I think that's when we start to get into some like really cool kind of spaces. I'll share this, but I, for whatever reason, a really bad job of letting me copy links. So I'm gonna open the actual chat in another window and see if I can grab it. There it is. Okay, let's see. Oh, this is cool. This is already cool. Oh, hell yeah. This rules. There's sound effects that you can't hear, but they're making little like pixely like noises as I go over the sidebar menu. Neat. Yeah, portfolio sites, I think, offer a really good opportunity for people to be playful, right? Because it's just different. It's incredibly well put together. That is fantastic. And yes, Microsoft Bob is the source of Clippy, for better or for worse. See, and I disagree. Like, I understand why they think Microsoft Bob is a failure, but you know, I think you gotta try stuff and you win lose. And like, we remember it, right? And we talked about it here years and years and years later. So I don't think it was a failure. I think it was interesting and experimental. Let's see. Sorry. I'm not links on Twitch so that I can click on them. I'm not ignoring you. Doop. Gosh, elevator. What's this? Aw, that's cute. It made a little elevator ding noise. Oh, look at the mirror. That's adorable. I am dying. I love the mirror. Oh, I took my cursor away for a minute. Huh. Funky. That's wild. Oh man. All right. New link. Let's see. What's this one? Oh, I think I've seen this where the car moves along the top as you. Turns out I'm awful at this. That's what I'm learning. Oh no. Oh no, I'm too bad at this to do it on screen. Oh. I can't drive. That's what I've learned. That's horrible. And look at the top while I'm driving in the like tab along the top. The car's moving. That's incredible. I love that. That is super, super fun. It's fun integrating WebGL with the normal web. I haven't played with that a lot, but I'm interested. But yeah, these were fun. Here, this one was the car, and this one was the elevator, and then this one was the really cool like Japanese pixel portfolio site. So yeah, there are people out there doing really cool stuff. right? And I think the trick is just kind of managing user expectations, I guess. Oh, and I can drag through this as well. Neat, right? So like making sure that what you created is intuitive enough that your users will eventually figure it out. This one I think is really cool because it's interesting and different, but it doesn't actually change how you interact with the website, right? So like when you scroll, it scrolls. And even though it's like kind of doing this side scrolly thing, it doesn't change the way that I am like, I'm interacting with it the same way I would interact with any website, right? Like it's got the side menu still, I can still scroll. Things work the way I expect them to work. They just do different things. That I think is incredible. That's fantastic design. So, but that being said, we're a little bit over time today, which is fine. We had fun, honestly. I would much rather have fun and do this kind of stuff than just talk into the void for an hour. So thank you. I had a blast. I really appreciate all of you guys sharing. Yes, a balance of familiarity and novelty. That is perfectly put. But I am going to wrap up for today. Thank you guys for hanging out. Genuinely had a blast today. So I'm glad you were here. But have a lovely Monday. Have a good week. And I will be back same time, same channel next week for more Dev by Design. We're going to be talking about white space, I believe. So don't want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. See you guys later.